Day 95. I'm reading If God is Love by page 174. When the distinctions between clergy and laity, member and non-member, disappear, we are not left with chaos. We are left with a church in which all men and women are expected to take their spiritual journey seriously, where each person's contribution is valued, and where there is space for all to learn and grow. A gracious church is a safe place to ask questions, explore new ideas, admit our struggles, and seek assistance. Sadly, this is not the nature of most congregations. Too often, a church is where people who already agree gather to have their viewpoints reinforced. When I first began preaching on universal salvation, Larry, a member of my congregation, told me an odd story. His friend had heard of my theology and had chastised Larry for believing in the salvation of all. Larry explained that he didn't believe in the salvation of all, but appreciated my point of view. His friend, even more disturbed, asked, "How can you attend a church where you don't believe everything the pastor believes?" A better question is whether people should attend a church whether they are expected to believe everything the pastor believes. Early in the history of the church, many argued for precisely this conformity. Irenaeus, one of the early champions of orthodoxy, was suspicious of this diversity. He accused all who disagreed with him of being heretics, frauds, and liars. He suggested Christians need not ask any further questions. All the important issues were resolved. Elaine Pagel notes, he writes his massive 5-volume attack, The Refutation and Overthrow of Falsely So-Called Knowledge, to demand that members of his congregation stop listening to any of them, those who didn't agree with Irenaeus, and return to the basic foundation of their faith. Irenaeus promised that he will explain for them what the scriptures really mean, and insists that only what he teaches is true. Unfortunately, his view of church won the day. Many pastors today act more like Irenaeus than Jesus. We forgot Jesus was accused of being a fraud and liar. The religious authorities of his time considered him unorthodox and dangerous. He asked and encouraged questions. He told stories that required reflection. He challenged the assumptions of his day. He commanded his disciples to love God with heart, soul, strength, and mind. He told his disciples to ask, seek, and knock. He wasn't threatened by doubt. A gracious church is a place where people can come with questions, doubts, and struggles without fear of being condemned. Our focus is not on supplying quick and easy answers to difficult problems, but creating the space to think and explore. In the midst of our theological struggle, a gracious church reminds us of what really matters, how we treat those around us. The final characteristic of a gracious church is compassion. To be compassionate is to suffer with the world. Traditional Christianity emphasizes Jesus' suffering for the world. Rather than seeing the cross as a symbol of Christian commitment, it becomes a symbol of one man's sacrifice. Yet even Jesus didn't understand the cross this way. He said, "If anyone want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." The cross is a symbol of Jesus' willingness to absorb pain, to share the most brutal of human conditions, and to demonstrate grace and forgiveness to the bitter end. The authenticity of Jesus' commands to love our neighbors and enemies, to love our neighbors and enemies, is confirmed by his willingness to forgive both Jews and Romans from the cross. A gracious church is a church willing to pull the cross down from its steeple and shoulder it in the world. Clarence Jordan tells of a pastor giving him a tour, a multi-million-dollar church facility. It was one of those graceful, swooping things that went up into a big, beautiful cross way up on top, and he pointed to it and he said, "Even our cross cost us $10,000. And I said, "Brother, you got gypped. You got gypped. The time was you could get them for nothing." That's still true. You can still get a cross for free. When I think of the way of the cross, I think of Father Damien. He was a Belgian priest who, in 1863, was sent by the Catholic Church to Hawaii. He went there unaware that Hawaii was the throes of a terrible leprosy epidemic. Hundreds were catching this disfiguring and fatal disease. And this was in a day when leprosy was still thought to be caused by sexual immorality. Lepers were seen by many as both physical and spiritual outcasts. Father Damien arrived in Hawaii as officials there began to collect the lepers and exile them to the island of Molokai. Stranded there with only the barest essential and no medical care, many quickly died. Father Damien protested and in 1873 was allowed to establish Kalapapa, a colony for lepers. He built a church, hospital, homes, and school. He recruited doctors and nurses. He pastored the church and the government to provide funds. He sought research into the cause of the disease and argued it wasn't. He researched into the cause of the disease and argued it wasn't caused by sexual immorality. Most of all, Father Damien refused to be afraid of his parish of lepers. He touched and hugged them, even though he knew the risk. In 1883, he began to feel a tingling in his own leg. He too had contracted leprosy. His superiors in the church and government accused him of sexual immorality, but allowed him to remain Kalapapa, since no parish would have accepted a priest with leprosy. For the next 6 years, he labored to build the colony into a place of comfort and compassion. But on April 2, 1889, he finally died of the complications of his disease. In 1959, when Hawaii became a state, it was allowed to place 2 statues of state heroes in the capital. One was of Father Damien. The world recognizes act of grace. It also knows how often the church has been ungracious. Christianity will earn the right to speak to the world when we finally live and act like Jesus. Then and only then will we be able to transform the kingdoms of this world into the kingdom of God. Okay, that's the end of the chapter 6. So I should stop here. Please correct me if you can. Bye.